Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your email questions and comments, dj@ArtistFirst.com. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And we're back. You just can't get rid of us.
Oh, my.
And tonight, we are going to pursue our next hour. Wait a minute. We're going to pursue our next hour with courage.
And conviction.
Tonight we're going to talk about, the prompt for this show tonight is one of the more famous Stoics, Marcus Aurelius. And if you don't know the Stoics, they are a fun bunch.
Oh, my.
They are a fun bunch. But they really are actually, the interesting thing about Stoicism, which was a philosophy, and there are a number of different Stoics, some more famous than others. Marcus Aurelius is arguably the most famous one. The thing about Stoicism is it's actually an uplifting philosophy. It just doesn't sound like it. Really, it's very humanistic. It's very humanistic philosophy. But tonight's one of the qualities that the Stoics value is to have to be self-possessed, to be self-determining, and to have the courage of one's convictions, specifically. And so tonight we have a quote from our good friend Marcus A., and maybe you might read it.
All righty. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own. Marcus Aurelius.
And it seems like a sort of a subtle thing to say, but that the nub of it is, and you see this in almost everybody, is that certainly if you say to someone, who do you look out for? You look out for number one. You look out for yourself. Of course, you might also look out for those you love and so on. But you always have to say, well, my self-preservation is extremely important to me. My self well-being, the well-being of myself, my pleasures. My pain is more important to me than really anyone else's pain. If you're suffering, you want people to know about it. So all these things, yourself is quite important to yourself, but yet if you, you'll find many, many people who, if another person or persons expresses an opinion about them, it wounds them, or they're almost afraid to go against it. It's like, well, they must see something I don't see. They must be right. I must be wrong. If the group thinks one thing, who am I? That's the sentiment. Who am I to go against that? Who am I to put my opinion or my judgment above that of another? And it's a really funny thing, and that's what Marcus is bringing up here. Right. That we all love ourselves. We all think of ourselves as the best person ever. But if someone else's opinion goes against us, all of a sudden it's like, well, they don't like me. Aw, they don't like you. and people will do, Margaret, people will do almost anything to win the approval of others. To be considered great in another's eyes. They'll do almost anything.
Isn't that interesting, though? Because when you look at it and realize that their way of seeing you seems to be important. And my question is why? Why is that so heavy on a person's thought reality. And it comes back to the fact that we are social beings. We do want the interaction. We want to be accepted. And you want to be loved.
Yeah.
You know, acceptance means love in a basic group. You're accepted. It means, okay, well, you're with us. And again, we were born to be social creatures. We were born to be in relationship with other people. So that begins to become important when you're stepping out of your family group. And a family group is the foundation of where it all began. Ideally, your family will accept you pretty much as you are, hopefully.
Ideally.
Right. And you realize that the acceptance is always there. No matter how crazy you may be, your family is there to back you, ideally. And then stepping outside of that group, familial group, you're trying to reproduce that kind of patterning in a more social setting. So naturally, you're going to gravitate to those that you are familiar with. Or if you have different opinions than from what the traditional family group had, you're going to start gravitating towards people who agree with you. And it's always that agreeing with you part that seems to be important.
And I would turn it around, too, and I'll say that people will transform themselves or suppress themselves in order to fit in, because one of the other driving factors is they don't want to be rejected. So sometimes you'll have this dissonance, and I know growing up you had a similar sort of a dissonance between how you have to act within the family and the mores and customs and guidelines that you have to act within, and then the outward-facing face, which is that if, in order to fit in, especially as a young adult, you'll go along with the crowd. Now, I'm not saying you did this, but people will do this. They'll go along with the crowd. They'll
accepted.
Right. They won't talk about themselves and what they do in their family because they're like, well, it's not like everyone else's family, and I don't want to be the one who stands out. You suppress your individuality to fit in. And oftentimes you can reject what was your earliest experiences of being accepted in a particular group. If at some point, and this is, I think, some of the impetus of it, if the ego says, well, nobody likes that us, we have to be this us, we have to present this face where we agree with these opinions and we do these things and we don't stand out and we don't talk about our language or our culture or where we came from because nobody likes those things here. And that all may be completely, utterly, totally false. In fact, when you really get into a relationship with somebody, they usually want to know what's unique about you. What are your real individual experiences, for argument's sake? But this, as you just said, this driving force to be accepted can, in one sense, you said, people you may seek out those who agree with you. I think that's the second stage. I think the first stage is you almost hide within the ethos of the group and say, oh yeah, I'm just like you guys. I want to fit in. Unless you become a trendsetter, a leader, someone who is seen as by the crowd, someone to follow. And this is another type of trap. But people can go that way, seeking fame and notoriety and to be noticed and to be copied. All the things of fame.
To be fed.
To have the ego be fed.
The ego stroking. Yeah.
The ego stroking. And Marcus, remember Marcus? We're going to go back to Marcus.
Yes.
Marcus's statement is really that he's amused by this behavior. That, we love ourselves. And what he's really saying about that is that the nearest and dearest and most wonderful person to you is you, narcissist. But also, he is saying, though we love ourselves, though we profess to love ourselves, we're more than willing to give the face of agreement to transform who we appear to be through our appearance, through our words, our actions, our beliefs that we espouse, transform all those things in exchange for the coin of acceptance, or in exchange for the non-rejection, the opinions of others. If people say to you, how can you act that way? Why would you do this? Why can't you do that? Everyone else is doing this. Why do you have to be so X, Y, or Z? And you have that instant moment of, well, this is who I am, but they don't like me. So what do I do? It becomes an isolating sort of threat, a fear, an ego attack. And oftentimes the ego will quail and cower and say, oh, well, we better just say that we like what they like too, so they'll like us. And it's a weird thing, because in essence the ego is denying what it was and turning itself into something else. As long as it gets fed, as you said before, as long as it's getting, the feeding of acceptance, it doesn't care what it doesn't really have any belief.
Well, I always wonder about that. You're going to change yourself in order to fit in. There's a certain degree of it in society. We all do that, so that
it works.
Yeah, but to really go deep inside and say, okay, well, I'm going to do that even though I don't agree with it. That's just so dissonant, because you set up a dissonant wave within yourself when you do something that you really don't believe in or don't want to do. And that's when the conflict starts. You'll be arguing with yourself until you resolve it within you. And frankly, was it really worth it?
Well, oftentimes people will come to a crisis point and say, well, I've been living a lie.
Yes. And I don't even know who I am.
Yes. It becomes an existential crisis. Or initially, this can feel sort of right, maybe, that you're going along with the crowd because you get this dopamine hit of acceptance. But what I believe starts to turn that around is that you'll see that the consequences of going along with the crowd result in, let's say, injury to oneself or others, or it results in a constriction of another's freedom or another's individuality, or this conformity becomes a prison. I can't do anything. I can't say anything that disagrees with the group, or I'll be rejected. And so within you, as you said, there's this dissonant wave, because there is the kernel of a belief, perhaps something which you really know is true. And then you have these layers of deceit that you put upon it, kind of, I won't say this because someone else, it's either omission or maybe even just like lip service to a particular idea. Even though I don't believe that, I'll just say it so I, go along to get along kind of stuff. But within, there's a conflict. As you say, it builds up a charge.
Right. And when stuff like this begins to happen to you, one thing you can notice is the fact that these people are saying all this stuff, but you don't have to say a word. You just sort of look at them and kind of nod your head going, and they just assume automatically that you must be agreeing with them.
Isn't that so? Yeah, that's sort of an artful way, though.
Well, it's the way to, you're like register, or if they look at you, you're like, well, I'm turning it around, what you just said. And usually I sort of just bring another point in.
Yeah.
But that kind of, you are basically being thoughtful about it. And allowing people to see that, you don't have to be actively bringing a conflicting viewpoint to argue about, to debate. It's just like, well, okay, that's your opinion. Or that's what you feel. And frankly, they never ask you how you feel.
No, there are two very good points there, and we might go through both of them. I mean, the very first one is as you mature and you become more skilled, and you realize that perhaps, the conformity or the going along with the crowd was something that was more driven by your insecurity at the time. So you become a more secure person, and you can not only make space for these other opinions, but rather than challenge them, as you say, and say, well, it's either this or that, you just say, okay, I hear you, and that's interesting.
Usually enough.
Right. It's usually enough just to hear it, and without giving either a full-throated rejection or an overt acceptance. What you're really just saying is, okay, I hear your opinion. And that, I think, is a much more nuanced and more mature way, because what you're really saying is, you're looking for an act. You're looking for a resonance. And rather than me...
You mean the other person.
The other person is bringing up and saying, aren't you going to do an X, Y, Z, and aren't you doing that, and aren't you in this one, and aren't you the red team, the blue team, whatever. And you say, I hear you. And you don't reject it, but you don't also you don't add energy to their argument. You don't either draw them into a conflict, a debate, or even just say, I don't want to talk about it. It's just hearing. It's just really an accepting kind of mind frame, and allowing it space to kind of go out, an echo, and come back. And it's almost an "is that so" moment in one regard, because you hear all this noise and bluster, and you know that within yourself you've got the courage of your convictions, but you also have the serenity or the grounded awareness that you don't have to make another agree with you. Your own internal is complete in and of itself, that it doesn't need to combat a conflicting view or just an opposite or other view. You can say, well, that's fine for you, without even saying that's fine for you.
No, just what I found is most people really aren't interested in what your opinion is. They just want to go off and tell you exactly what they think is happening. And you just like, okay. And they very rarely ask for other input, other data, other viewpoints. It's just this one note song.
Yeah.
Continually. And at that point, you're just like, well, there's no discussion here then.
Right.
You really don't want a discussion. What you want is to be able to dictate off a podium continually so that nobody interrupts you.
Right.
And
pontificate.
I've had quote-unquote discussions like that with a few people.
Yeah.
And it's just, at that point, you're just like, oh, okay. It's like listening to a small child. And if you're doing other things, what you wind up doing actually, is you listen. There's a part of you that you've designated in your consciousness to listen and just tell you if it turns out there's actually something unique coming out. And the rest of you is concentrating on something else.
That's true. But there have been times in history when this is not enough, when the majority demand compliance. You can see it in totalitarian regimes. You can see it in certain types of cultures where no dissenting or non-agreeing
permitted.
It is permitted. To take an example, a modern day example, you have in the oppressive regime, which is in North Korea, they have certain days which are designated for mourning for the dear leader. And literally, it's not even days, it can be weeks on end. And during that time, if you smile in the street, you can be arrested. You're supposed to, in essence, be in sackcloth and ashes and in abject sadness. It's like, if you remember the fictional 2 Minutes Hate, from Brave New World or whatever it was, where the it was not just a suggestion. It was a prescribed time when you had to hate whichever enemy the state said you had to hate, and there was no dissent was brooked. And you see this writ large in as I said, totalitarian regimes or oppressive cultures. And in these cases, if you're a Solzhenitsyn, or you're a Bonhoeffer, or someone who is appalled and has deeply held convictions that this is wrong, this is anti-human, anti-life, whatever it may be, you're faced with a dilemma. In this case, you can't just tacitly allow it to, because these people aren't just spouting with no malice. They're literally not looking for agreement. They're looking for enforced conformity. And
obedience is what they want.
Right. Obedience without any recourse. You can't disagree.
Right.
And in these types of situations, our response is either to kowtow, to in essence bow down, and even if in our hearts we feel that this is incorrect and wrong, give every outward appearance of accepting this, because the threat is a physical harm. The threat is a death, and yet in those situations there are those incredibly brave souls, like Bonhoeffer, for argument's sake, whose convictions are so firm that they can't stomach that they have to stand up. And this is incredibly rare. What Aurelius is talking about here is more than normal, just someone's opinion. And we don't want to gainsay their opinions. We might go along or so on. But when it's really a question of a morality, a question of morality which must be honored. This, I believe that you are not only wrong, but that it is an affront to humanity itself, what you're doing. And in the name of that affront, and in spirit, you have to grab the courage of your convictions and stand. And this is something which is, as you can probably imagine, incredibly rare. Most people are more than willing to, well, I disagreed, but I couldn't go against it because I would lose my job, or I couldn't go against it, or they would threaten my family, or they would take away my economy, the money or my house, or so all these things are before their convictions. The money, the house, whatever.
Yes.
And the ones who are the Gandhis of the world, these people who will stand in the face of everyone else, it seems, in the world, saying you're wrong. and conform and obey and say, no, I know I'm right. Where does that come from, Margaret? That's beyond the physical. That's beyond the corporeal or the ego. That's got to be from the being. That level of conviction.
Well, you're in that moment when you're faced with whatever the punishment may be, whether it's physical pain or being ostracized from a group. There's a truth that resides within you, and you know when that's being transgressed. You know when something is attacking the core of your soul. And at that point, you realize, no, I do not give permission for you to take a piece of my soul, because obeying something like that goes completely against the truth that's in your heart means that you have to rip a piece of your soul off, and they get to take it.
Yeah, and feed off of it.
And eat it. Right. So they can only take it if you give it to them.
Right. Very good. Very, very true, yes. Your willingness, your compliance is what they really want.
And that's where you must choose. Will you give that piece over? Part of your soul or all of your soul? Or are you going to stand there and go, no. No. And it's a all-encompassing being in that moment. You're completely there, and you know what's going on. And you see the evil staring at you through someone else's eyes. And there's a part of you that just rises up and says, no. What is it in the Bible? What can man do to me except hurt the body? My soul? My spirit? No. That's untouchable unless I give it over. And understanding that the power that you have internally is a wondrous thing for any human being to realize, because you are only tapping the potential of what it means to be fully human. And there's a vastness there. And truthfully, when the evil sees that rising up in you, oh, the look on the face. The look on the face is amazing.
Nothing strikes fear in the heart of tyrants than someone who, with the courage of their convictions, says no. Because, as the statement is, you can kill me, you can destroy me, you can take every piece of me and put it into the fire, but my rejection of you still stands.
Yeah.
And that's what you've done here. When you do that, as you said, you reach the vastness. You go outside of ego, because ego wants to give in, because ego doesn't want to be in any way troubled by this. You go outside of into the being state, and you touch upon an eternal thing. You touch upon the eternal, which says, no, you may not take a piece of me. And it goes beyond your corporeal death. It doesn't matter anymore. You've rejected it, and you've wounded that. You've wounded that demand to its heart. You've set it in complete and total panic and fear by your whole being rejection.
The ego doesn't register, honestly, when you're in that moment.
No, it's not there. I'm saying this is way beyond it. The ego would happily go along to get along, but you're so far beyond that. It's not even in the picture anymore. I agree.
Right. No, the ego doesn't even register because what is true is blazing within you.
Exactly. You're way far beyond that. We're way far beyond. We're beyond the end of the half hour. So let's take a moment, go back to the studio, take a little break, and on the other side we'll talk more about the courage of our convictions.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some moonstones and murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on The X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the ArtistFirst radio network.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And welcome to the second half of the thing of the hour of... I've lost my segue. Anyway, we're talking about the courage of convictions tonight, Marcus Aurelius. And when we went out on the break there, we had an interesting sort of take on this whole thing where, in essence, faced with a situation where compliance is not optional, compliance with a particular ideology or a particular oppressive, tyrannical type of regime is not optional. There are those throughout history, and some of their names are extremely famous, who have stood up in full awareness that they were risking everything, their lives, all of their, whatever possessions they have, perhaps even their families, and putting all that at risk to follow, in essence, the conviction of their heart, of their being state, which says that compliance would be an affront to their basic humanity, to all of our basic humanity, that the stricture that was being imposed, that was compliance with this particular, whatever particular oppression it was, and there are many different examples, was an affront to our basic spirit and our basic humanity, our shared common vastness of being, an affront to consciousness, if you will. And in the name of that consciousness, in the being state with that consciousness, they said, in essence, no. And Margaret said it in the last half hour. When those who are, and because this is human beings, unfortunately, on both sides of the equation, when those who are attempting to enforce this oppression or to prosecute this oppression, and in essence acting in the name of this affront to our shared humanity, acting outside of humanity, when within them there is a devouring energy. It is looking for one thing, even though it's called by many names. It's looking for the compliance, the willingness of the being that is being oppressed to give over its precious essence, which is then fed. It feeds this thing, this demonic, if you will. And when at the point where the vastness embodies itself in a person or persons and says no, the look in the eyes of the person who has unfortunately given themselves over to this oppressive thing shows that battle right there has been won. that no matter what is done to the corporeal existence of the one who has accepted the vastness, has said no, that nothing can change the rejection. And the rejection is the only thing that will defeat this thing. And these types of oppressive regimes know that the rejection of one person is enough to topple. Remember the lone person standing in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. Why did the Chinese crush that as viciously as they did? Because that was a symbol to the world of that type of, no matter what you do to me, this is wrong. And we can think of other examples. Gandhi's another one.
Yes. When deep inside of you, you realize that what this person is doing is dehumanizing you and wants to perpetuate that act or thought form, saying that that's normal. The revulsion that rises from within, because you know that no real human being would push that, would carry it through, would perpetuate it. And it's at that point you realize you're fighting something more than the human form that's in front of you.
Yes.
And the refusal is absolute inside the human spirit. Like you are taking away my freedom to choose, my freedom to be, to experience what's going on. And it's interesting because there are many, how do I say this? In a society, in a culture, there are rules that groups have set up that you're supposed to behave this way, or you're supposed to do it this way. And if you don't, it means that you don't respect who put the rules up and how you're supposed to behave, because we've told you what's good and we've told you what's bad. There's never an in-between, mind you. Either this action is good or this action is bad. Or anything outside of the action we told you to do is bad.
Right. And there's no debate.
Right. And when you've been under that kind of oppressive thought, being, it really sparks something inside of you. That's about the best way I can describe it. Because I think I've said this before, the main difference between Asian culture and Western culture is that Western culture allows for a family individual. Eastern culture does not believe in individuality. Everything is for the family. So, it's a problem.
Yes, it's a problem.
When people migrate, the Eastern Asian family migrates to America because there's so much by way of freedom here, the freedom to express who you are. And growing up, I do remember them saying, "Oh, there's too much freedom for, no, you can't have that, no." And it was always shut down. Growing up in it, I would ask why. And back then it was, I still remember the phrase, children should be seen and not heard. Which, nowadays would be considered sacrilege.
or child abuse or something.
Something, yes. But what it did was it forced me to observe the behavior when dealing with an Asian mindset and observe the behavior when dealing with a Western mindset. And that's where you almost became schizophrenic because they expected you to perform really well in school and the outside world. But the minute you came into the home, you were supposed to be subservient and obedient and take everything that they say as truth. And it just didn't sit well with me. And so I do understand that conflict intimately because you love these people. You love them all and you do want to help. And it forces you to realize that unless there is a common ground that you're meeting on, you're never discussing or interacting or experiencing things the same between two parties. It gets interpreted and reinterpreted. It's mind-blowing, actually.
Well, there's a truly a culture divide. And as you said, it can become very apparent when two different cultures meet because somebody who is inculcated and raised in one is now living and having children in another. Because that generational gap, which is always there regardless, even within the culture, there's always a generational experiential gap, is widened immeasurably. And then there's the reaction. And I think that you can viscerally speak to the reaction where there was one set of rules within these walls and another set outside. And the transition between the two, every day going in and out to school or out to whatever, and then back in, is a rough passage because you have to be, you almost have to split yourself into the person I am outside the house and the person I am inside the house, and then really who you actually are, your whole and complete being, which has to have both of those things within it, and it's bad at so many levels.
Well, okay. Speaking for myself, because I can only speak for myself, all right? I didn't schizophrenic myself. I am who I am. I interacted a certain way inside the house, and I interacted a certain way outside the house according to who it is I had to interact with.
Right.
But my internal was always me, and I was always observing and looking at things to try to understand what the underlying motivation was. Right. Because the one thing you always picked up was there is always a motivation behind someone wanting to interact with you. And that became the foundation of taking a step in a relationship or an interaction with another person. If that person, it felt as if this was a one-sided kind of dealie, no interaction.
Right.
That's internally, they're just mouthing off at you and they're just, not really disturbing you, that's fine. Okay, you go keep blithering, fine. Or that's when you really found out whether or not a person was your friend or not, or a person really cared about you or not. And then there's different levels of discernment at that point. If the motivation is true, then you realize, okay, there is a foundation for a relationship here. But if the way they interacted was by lying to you constantly, Then you just said, okay, I love you. You're just going to keep talking.
Right.
But I do not give weight to anything that you're saying. It's a interesting little tightrope that you have to walk. But truth of the matter is you have to know who you are. You don't subdivide yourself into these little bits saying, okay, this is who I am at school, and this is who I am at home, and this is who I am when I'm interacting with this group. You will make yourself crazy if you do that.
What I meant, and maybe said inartfully, is that you what you just said, if I were to abstract it, is at a very, very early age you became extremely discerning and aware that there was talk, and then there was the underlying actual energies, what people were really looking for, or really doing, the story that they were telling themselves. And in that situation, many others would end up schizophrenically splitting themselves. But what I believe happened to you is you trained yourself through perforce, maybe in the beginning, to be extremely perceptive down to their motivation. And then, as you said, then you can use that tool like a laser beam or a scanner and say almost immediately, this person's speaking out of their butt. Or this one's just off in space. But this one, there's a true heart resonance here. Here's someone who I can actually speak to. Because if you're at an early age having to realize that even though they're blathering up here and talking, their real motivations are inimical, or their real motivations are to dominate, or their real motivations are to get me to go along and do this and do this and do this. Once you break free, you have to find your own center. Then you find that, and then you can see very clearly. But you've been pushed into a place that very few people early on get pushed to. Maybe later they come to this, but early on, if you're pushed into that, you have to find your own center early, and then you have to find the perception early, and then you realize that the things that these people I love are telling me are not true. I still love them, which is a very advanced concept for a child, but they're blowing smoke all the time. And so, I now have to love you, but understand that you're not a source of truth or a source of guidance. You're really just have all these kind of weird motivations, and I can see down to the core of them, and I realize that, at the base, you do love me, and I love you, but you don't know how to express it, and you don't know how to get around the blocks of culture in yourself.
Right.
And once you have that very deep insight, first of all, it can be incredibly enlightening, but it's also sort of very isolating, because you have to now understand that everyone around you, a large portion of them, are telling themselves a story.
Right.
Well, that's, of that type of beginning, there are people who would be broken by it, or who would be very schizophrenic in this environment. But if you survive that, you end up with a very fine BS detector. Really good one. But in fact, you also have to give yourself the credit that this is the being who you are. And so given that, it was also part of you that could grow into that direction and have that capability. But, writ large, there are even worse oppressive cultures, even worse oppressive regimes who where groupthink becomes, almost, it looks like it's being enforced because it's so pervasive. You have a whole bunch of people who are doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, and looking at everybody else and saying, why aren't you doing the XYZ thing? Because that's the thing to do, and don't you want to come along and go along? And if you have this really finely tuned internal compass, this internal center, this internal BS detector, you look at them and go, you're just all telling yourself a story, and really out of fear.
Right.
And yeah, I'll listen to it, but I'm not going to go along with that, and I don't have to tell you that you shouldn't go along. It gives you a very sort of a deep perspective from which you can reflect upon social movements or other types of, let's say, panics that happen in a society, or in any society, in any human, the mob mentality can overtake almost anything.
Right.
And yet with this early life experience, or whenever it comes to you, you can sort of, you get broken free from that susceptibility to the groupthink.
Well, the one of the problems, I guess, is that I was always taught you had to care about whatever is in front of you, because you can see it and they can't.
Well, yeah.
But the corollary, of course, is that they may not want anything changed.
Mm.
And it took a while to learn that one.
Mm. That's courageous too, by the way, to allow another to have their story and not to have to, argue them out of it.
Right.
That's discernment more than anything else. And it's something which is it reflects the being, the fact that you have this deep level of discernment. And you can come to it. You can work upon it by looking deeply into your heart. Like we said many times before, the eyes of the heart know it's true. When the heart feels it's true, follow that guide. Then you're on the path of, not going along with the groupthink, because the groupthink doesn't have any heart.
Well, the eyes of the heart are connected to spirit, to divine spirit. And that's when truth can come through.
And courage is the heart. But why don't you take it away?
We've reached the end of our hour. And I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.